All right, everyone. Well, welcome back to the Next Steps podcast. We are continuing our run of episodes to complement our Stronger Together message series. And we are looking at a few different types of relationships to complement sort of the broader view that we've been getting on the Sunday messages. We're going a little bit deeper on a couple of different specific topics. So I'm hosting your conversation. My name is Veronica. I'm on staff here at Blackhawk with our spiritual formation team. And this past Sunday, Pastor Tiffany gave a great message about her spiritual friendships. And we got a lot of questions about how these types of relationships look with different people and different people groups. And so we asked some guys from our church to come and talk about their group. So I'm delighted to be joined today by CJ Klaas and John Reis. For a second, I had to question myself. We worked on pronunciation right
We
before
did.
this, and
Nailed it.
I got it. Okay, good.
Yep. We did.
So why don't you guys introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about you?
Yeah, I'm CJ Klaas. I've attended Blackhawks since 2008, I think, so shortly after the Braidway facility was built. So we've been attending for a long time. I'm married with three children, ranging in ages from 18, 15 to 11. We were part of launching Blackhawk Fitchburg back in the day and then moved over near the west side, and now we attend Brader Way. And I've known this guy, John Rice, for a really long time. We were just commemorating about how long we've known each other.
About the same amount of time, yeah, since you started coming to church here. And my wife and I also started attending around that same time, sort of a formative time in our lives, getting married, having kids. We have two daughters as well. And so a lot of changes and a lot of new rhythms and friendships forming at that stage of life.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here. I'm so excited. I basically just sent you guys an email out of the blue and asked you very quickly to come meet me and talk about this. So, why did you say yes? Like, what do you think is important about this topic to share?
I'm personally really passionate about men's spiritual friendships, largely because of my own experience or lack thereof, kind of earlier in my adult life, which I'm sure as we, talk through this today, that'll come up more. Um, but the void in my life of Christian men, and really men who would talk about anything, we'll just call it deeper or more serious, created a really big barrier to my spiritual development. And so just kind of slowly over time, I often will refer to it, and John knows this, as like the tidal wave of society or the river of society. And it can just be hard to step out of that
Hmm.
current to do anything different. And so it was really, John, you and I met back in 2008 or 9, as we talked about, but it wasn't till 5, 7 years later that you and I really started getting deeper in specifically men's community where my faith blossomed. So anyway, that's to answer your question. That is why ultimately I wanted to be part of this, because it's a passion of mine because of my own experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the reason it is important to me is just the sort of what it has, the effect it has had in my life and in periods where it's there and when it's not. It's so obvious to me how important it is. And I didn't really have anything before college like that either. And so how the world forms you without strong Christian friendships. And then when I went to college and I got plugged in with some guys who really were solid. And then after college, having that period without that again, but longing for that and sort of having this in and out situation made it sort of click. Those sorts of things take a while for me to appreciate and to sink in. But having a period in between college and when we connected later, where I realized the growth wasn't the same. My priorities were starting to shift. And so it was really clear what a difference having solid fellow male friends, really makes in spiritual growth.
Yeah. Right. You guys touched on it briefly, but you mentioned that you met and then later you kind of started this intentional relationship. So tell me a little bit about like how you met and then how you got to where you are now.
Like all good things, I think we met through our spouses. um, so yes, we met through, we were both on a committee called Young Life. It's another Christian ministry here in the area. But we were on committee for Young Life in Verona, I think through our wives. And then we met, we're part of similar communities and friend groups at the time. Um, but again, I don't remember the exact year, but then we got into community group together.
Yep.
And then after community group, it led to saying, hey, what about a deeper intentional kind of male community group? And again, to take a step back here, a little bit of my own story was that I grew up in a Christian home, played competitive soccer, and then finishing up competitive soccer and going into, I'll just call it like normal life, was a big identity shift for
Yep.
me, which this is not an uncommon story, but through that identity shift, I really just lost my way and was more, again, taken over by a kind of tidal wave of society. And in so doing, I just recognized that, wow, my patterns of living and behavior and rhythms, spiritual development were just gone.
Hmm.
And so joining a community group was that first step for me of saying, I'm not going to just let the current take me. But that was one step. I think beyond that was recognizing that men often struggle to share deeper things going on in their lives. Like really, really struggle with this. And that's not I don't mean to make that a blanket statement. That's not true of all men. But more generically speaking, I would say that was true for me and true of a lot of the men that I was around. And so finding men who were willing to meet, who weren't going to make it super awkward, but were willing to share what was going on in their lives for the intention of like growing spiritually. And we say spiritually, but being a better husband, a better father, all of what goes along with being a Christ follower. That was really what launched our friendship. And as we talked about, I think that was around 8 years ago. And since then, I mean, my goodness, now, of course, like I'm an evangelist for this, right? It's like now I would say, oh my goodness, if men are looking to grow in their faith and they're not part of a male specific community, I just couldn't suggest it enough.
Yeah. And I think a couple of things I've noticed in that process, one was just the value of having someone like CJ who initiates. And so a lot of guys are sort of reactive in this, and myself included. And so having someone who's the protagonist and willing to start this stuff is really, really important. And so thankful for that, but also recognizing that because it's so uncommon or relatively uncommon for men to feel comfortable or have outlets to share what's going on in a deeper way in their lives, it can be uncomfortable to initiate that. And so I think we've seen through different people we've connected with that when you open that up, some people are really ready for it. And some people, it's a little too much. And I think it's still valuable for everybody, but depending on where they are in their walk, sometimes they're ready for that level of deep connection and sometimes they're not. And that's totally cool. Wherever you are, I think God's still working to bring you into a deeper place. But the impact of having someone who can initiate that and then bringing other people in was really, it was special to me. And I think that's kind of a good component or an important component of that sort of friendship.
I think John and I have talked a lot about this, but we will often refer to, again, because I grew up being an athlete, athletics of, hey, if you want to be good at XYZ, for me it was soccer. If you want to be good at soccer, what are you doing about that, right? It would be silly for somebody to say, I really want to be great at soccer. And then you go, oh, where do you play? Oh, I don't play soccer. I just really want to be good at it.
Yeah.
And you go, what? So in a similar way, I found that my spiritual life was just that. Like I really want to draw closer to God.
Mhm.
I really want deeper intentional relationships, but I wasn't doing anything to make that happen.
Mhm.
And so, for John and I, it began just basically let's meet, gather some other men into this. To John's point, we found that some people will come and go, and that's actually good. That's
Mhm.
normal. John and I have probably been the closest throughout this, just continuing it through, but there can be seasons where you can and can't, and some of that can be fine. But for me personally, it's taken it out of the I hope to grow closer to God, or I want to grow closer to God, or I want to engage, men in spiritual friendship to okay, I'm doing something about it.
Yeah.
And that's been for me a game changer. I will admit, I still can be really not great as a human being at times, and I still make really bad decisions, and my wife could tell you all about it. So it's not like a silver bullet by any means,
Sure.
Well,
but it's intentional.
to sort of build on the athletics analogy, and I'm not a former professional athlete, as you can probably tell, but um, the idea of if I wanted to get really good at a sport, but even if I'm doing something about it, I'm doing it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to make near the progress as if you have one more person, multiple people going alongside you in that effort. And then to your last point, just because no matter how hard I try at being excellent at soccer, there, like I won't be. It's not a silver bullet.
Mm-hmm.
It
Right.
like I'll never dunk a basketball,
Yeah.
no matter how hard I try. There are you can still put effort into things and grow in a lot of ways, but as sinners, we will still mess up, and there are reasons that even the best of friends can't fix everything. But it is, I think that analogy of sports can be very helpful in seeing the value of coming alongside somebody, making sure that those people that you're with are doing work, like that we're not just talking about things, but we're actually practicing. Um, all of that is, I think, much more of a cultural awareness of, you see professional athletes
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, oh, they must have really put the work in. But then to your point, CJ, you think about, well, I want to get to a certain point, or I'm just not seeing any growth in my spiritual life. And it's like, yeah, well, maybe you're just sitting there, or you're only showing up on Sundays, and you
Mm-hmm.
may not, you may realize, maybe I should do more than that, but you're not sure where to start. I think developing friendships is a great place to sort of take that next step.
Well, and to play off of that again, John and I have also recognized that it's so easy for men's intentional relationships to turn into what we would refer to as like armchair Christianity. Just like, all right, we get together and
Mhm.
over time we just stop talking about spiritual things because it is, I would say, for many men, almost like always uncomfortable, right? Even 8 years down the line, John,
Yeah.
for you and I, it's like the intentional questions of where have you been spending your time? What
Yeah.
have you been reading? It just feels almost like, ugh, I just don't love it. Um, and so I say that only because I think that's one of the dangers of men's groups is that it can become this thing of like, hey, we'll start off with the intention of growing spiritually,
Mhm.
but eventually it's no different than going down to the local bar. We're talking about sports and
Mhm.
complaining about our wives. Or it's just so I only say that as just kind of a word of warning that it never, at least in my experience,
Yeah.
gets super easy. But my oh my, is it life changing when you have people knowing what's going on in your life and you're not hiding. Again, we found
Mhm.
that sin loves the dark. And when you shine light on it, it makes you uncomfortable, but sin loses its power in so doing.
Yeah, I think that just highlights that there are multiple levels of emptiness in our lives,
Mhm.
and one of those is just surface level friendships and being able to share your life with another guy. That in itself is relatively rare.
Yeah.
If you have some buddies that you can go to a bar or go watch sports with, be thankful for that. But then going the next level deep, there's this even bigger need or opportunity to grow beyond that surface level that we don't often touch, and is easy to keep isolated because it's the deepest level of your being. And often our spouses know, but usually beyond that, no one really knows what's going on at that level. And so being able to be vulnerable with someone takes a level of trust and a level of time spent with that person that is hard, both because it's uncommon and because people move and lives change and all of that. So, there are, as much as we can say like, oh, just start doing it, it's not a light switch that you can flip on and just
Good
say,
point. Yeah,
I've
good
got
point.
friends now.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's so important. Like some of the things you guys were talking about, just that it is still work, like we know the Holy Spirit transforms us, but we have to partner with them in that. And also like we're never done. Like you said, like we've never just arrived. We're never perfect, like spiritual human beings. But we have to keep doing that work. And it is like, I think it's uncomfortable for everybody over time that we have to keep coming. And a lot of times it's like, I don't know about you guys, but it's the same things, but like in a different way. You think you're past something and then it like crops up in a different way in a different area of your life. And you're like, why? Why is this still happening? So I think that's good, like you said, good and beautiful transformative work, but it does always require a little bit of effort on our part and sometimes a lot of effort on our part during different seasons. So
I think, yeah, to play off of that, I think there's something beautiful about intimate relationships, right?
mhm,
That's one of the most intimate relationships, the three of us have is with our spouses, but there's beauty in both the messiness of those relationships and then
mhm,
also in the transformation of, I often will say like, there's not that many people in my life that just will randomly call me out.
mhm,
My spouse does it all the time. And that can be frustrating and annoying and all the things that we know. But it's like, oh my goodness, the power and the
mhm,
beauty of that relationship and the intimacy of it. Well, if you can have more of those on a different premise, obviously, but more of those in the form of male friendships, I just think while it can be uncomfortable and difficult, oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Just to see what God can do with the depth of those intimate relationships where you have somebody who says, hey, I'm not here to call you out, but I am here to say when I think something's going wrong in your life, right? In a loving way, to have a brother do that is just unbelievably powerful.
Yeah. And I think often because of all the things that can go on in a marriage, hearing maybe the same thing from a friend versus a spouse can carry a very different meaning,
Yeah.
especially when you've known someone for a number of years and you might see those patterns play out or things that come and go. And you're like, it seems like you're struggling with the same thing
mhm,
in a cyclical way. And your spouse might not be in a position to really help you with that in a way that a friend who's, just different and not quite as close as your spouse can be another voice.
Yep.
Whereas I know for me, it would be easy to hear the same thing from my wife and not have it hit in the same way that a friend uh, would have saying the same thing.
sure. I recorded an episode with Christian and Sam about young adults, and we were talking about how that happens with parents. Like your
Yeah.
parents, when you're a young adult, your parents will tell you something, and it just doesn't hit quite the same way as when like your peers or a mentor will say the same thing. And I think that's so true. Like, and we know that God speaks through different people in our lives, and sometimes like He uses those. Often He uses those relationships to kind of speak truth into us when we're kind of ignoring it or blind to it or just won't hear it from one perspective. And he'll take a different tactic and a different perspective will come out, and then we'll have to go, oh, maybe there is something to
Right.
this. Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. I also wanted to go back to one of the things you said about the work that's involved
Mhm.
with a, a good friendship. Um, and that, I mean, this may not work for everybody, but one of the things that I think has been important for CJ and I is the regular nature of our meetings and that they're scheduled and it's the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And even so I was living in Europe for a couple years, and we found a time that worked where we could do regular check-ins with a group of guys, uh, even across the ocean. And so I think if I were to present that to someone who hasn't done that before, that can seem very regimented and like work.
Yep.
And it kind of is. But you yep. But you have to do it, especially in this phase of life where your schedule is so full. Like, I just have to treat that like any other commitment that's important. And if you don't have that time set aside, it's not going to happen. And it's unfortunate that I wouldn't spontaneously always reach out to a friend as often as I should, but I just don't. And so having this like scheduled thing, and I have that with a few friends where it's just like, all right, we have to get this on the books. Otherwise, it's going to be 3 months, 6 months, whatever before we talk. And so we're just going to have to schedule this. And it's sort of a compromise, I guess, to the world that we live in. But it's important, and it does take work to make that happen.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning that, John and I have probably been the most consistent as it relates to just being part of the same group for a long time. But there are other men that are part of the men's community group or kind of intentional male friendship that we're talking about here. So that'd be number one. But then number two, I think something that's been transformational for both John and I know there's been different podcasts on this particular book, but is ruthless elimination of hurry. Because you're talking about getting things on the schedule. And John Mark Comer would say, if you want to know, what somebody's all about is look at their checkbook and look at their calendar, right? And so, playing off of what you just said, I think that book and having read it really just led us to this place of like, if this is really going to be a thing and we're really going to be serious about it, it needs to be ongoing in some form.
Yep.
And it needs to be scheduled.
Yeah.
So someone asked Tiffany this after she talked on Sunday, and I feel like people might ask this as they're listening today. So we've talked about how it's a lot of work, but is it still fun?
Yeah, I think so.
You sound so excited, John.
It's like, yeah, I guess it's fun.
Fun at different ages means different things. I think what I find fun now at 42, I might not have put in the same category at other stages of my life. But I really enjoy getting up early. I enjoy spending time with my friends and talking about deep things. It's a different sort of fun than our kids might think of as fun. And we do still joke and we do still have a good time. But it's, there are also opportunities to go watch sports together, and there are opportunities to like do athletics together. There are those types of fun things too. But, and I think they can complement a good spiritual friendship. But the type of fun we have most often, I think might be a different picture of fun. Maybe more like some of the fun we read about Jesus having with the disciples. Like, you might see some of that and be like, that doesn't sound like fun. But you watch The Chosen, it seems like they probably did have a lot of fun.
Yeah, touche. No, I agree with John. We do plenty of things, outside of just our men's group that make it a lot of fun. And certainly when you're building deep, intimate friendships with other men, inevitably you get quite close and you learn how to razz each other and have a good time. So,
Yeah. Good. I'm glad it's still fun and not just not all work.
It wouldn't continue if there was no fun involved.
Right. Yeah. But again, it's sort of like, not that it's a hobby, but similar to a lot of hobbies, it's not always just like, oh, this is the best. But you look back and you're like, I'm enjoying this. And so whether it's like going for a long bike ride or gardening or whatever, like it's a enriching, fulfilling way to spend time and care for each other. And so I think beyond the fun word, not to get too specific.
No, I know what you mean.
It's rewarding in a very deep and meaningful way that playing a game wouldn't be as meaningful.
Yeah, I think sometimes we think about fun as like something that's like amusing or entertaining,
Yeah.
but really there's like these types of things bring deep fulfillment and deep joy and just like a sense of peace are fun in a different way. You know, it might not be always like entertaining when you're, you know, getting down to the deep, you know, nitty-gritty of your life, but it brings like fulfillment and joy, which is like so much more fulfilling. So,
Yeah. And almost sometimes, like athletics, sometimes the work that you put in can bring its own type of fulfillment.
mhm.
And that just like a recognition that, you're going through something with someone together that can be hard. Like we've both been through hard times and been able to be there for each other. And that's not fun,
Yep.
but it's rewarding and it's fulfilling. And, I wouldn't change it. And so I think that's um, just something to be aware of, especially going back to that concept of like, it can be work,
Sure.
but it's like a work that you feel good about and that you long for. And it's sort of like why we're here,
Mhm.
that sort of work.
Yeah.
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 John brings up a good point. I think probably where we have underestimated the value of the men's community that we've been a part of has been in kind of the lulls of life is just going along and we're meeting weekly and talking. But then when, things get tough, there's difficulty in a relationship with a child or with a spouse, or there's, a loss of a loved one. It's like, man, that is when you go, I am so grateful. Um, because that's when the people who are closest to you show up. And certainly, again, not to speak differently of community groups are wonderful and they show up in their own way.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful and wonderful. But to have men who know you at a deep level, who maybe you've even been talking about this for, a really long time, um, to show up when things aren't going well is transformational.
Yeah. That's actually a great point. So like what we've talked kind of like broadly about the importance of this and how it kind of looks in your guys' lives, but what does it actually look like? Like you said you meet at a regular time. How do you, are there ways that you structure your time or things that you guys talk about in particular?
I think it's evolved and it's changed based on season and some of the other guys we're meeting with. But I think some of the things that have been consistent is we're meeting weekly. I think there's certainly exceptions where we're traveling or different things, but the intent is to meet weekly. We meet in person whenever we can. Obviously, when I was overseas, that was hard. But
Yeah.
when I came back, either to visit or for good, that was important to resume. We usually have something we're doing
Hmm.
together, like reading a book, going through a set of disciplines, those sorts of things. And I think maybe, and I don't want to say it's necessarily different for women, but I think that's an important thing for men is to be working alongside somebody
Sure.
Sure.
and sort of having a shared work that we're doing. And
Hmm.
so a lot of the time when we're meeting on a weekly basis, it's, we'll spend a little time catching up, what's going on, how's the family, that sort of
Hmm.
thing. But then we focus on what we've been reading or what we've been doing, the struggles we've had, areas of prayer that are needed. Um, yeah, and I think, and then checking in through the week. But that's basically it. What am I missing?
No, I think you hit it. I think, and this is certainly not our idea, but we've through reading different books and different resources, we've landed on a few. We'll call them like pillars of what it is that we do consistently. So one of them you already mentioned, which is just fraternity. So men's community. The other is prayer. The other is scripture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, and with scripture comes like reading other books and resources. And then one of the other pillars that we've had is like spiritual disciplines or rhythms or patterns.
Yeah.
That could be fasting, that could be Sabbath, that could be different, just like ascetic disciplines that we've gone through. But those different pillars, as long as those are consistently there, they bring a different angle of spiritual development. Um, and we didn't always have that. I mean, early on, it was just like, let's just get together and talk, see what's
Mhm.
going on.
Yeah.
But I think we found out over time through different resources that we were reading. And again, for anybody who's interested, again, John Mark Comer's Ruthless Elimination of Hurry talks about a rule of life. And those rules of life often refer to different aspects of the Christian faith. But that's been impactful for us because I think at different times it's been just the men's meetings that have been most impactful. Other times it's been maybe the disciplines. Other times it's been scripture. And don't mishear me, they're all important, but
Sure.
at different times they've been emphasized.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the resources and some of the neat thing about doing this for a long time is you can dive into different things
Mhm.
in different seasons. And so last fall we were really in summer too, I guess, diving into the concept of fasting from some of the materials. And John Mark Comer, he has some podcasts on it. And so we were listening to that and really trying to explore how does fasting work for us and the group we've been meeting with. What effect does that have in our group? And one of the guys, was asking really good questions that sat with me of like, all right, so I'm not eating. Do I replace it with something? Do I take the money that I would have spent on food and give it to the poor? Do I take the same time that I would have been eating and pray? Like, all right, fasting, not eating, got it. But what does
Yeah.
that mean? How does that become a spiritual discipline?
Hmm.
And so having guys to wrestle with that, to dive into those sorts of things, I think that's, for me, the big difference between just hearing a podcast or reading a book and being aware of this concept and even trying it on my own and having it be something that actually impacts me and impacts my soul and lets God work through it because it's becoming more of a full concept and not just like a theoretical thing or even a surface level practice, which I'm going to butcher this quote, but I feel like uh, Pope Francis said something like, if your fast does not help the poor or help someone else, it's a fake fast.
Hmm.
And it's like those sorts of things where it's like you hear that sort of thing, you're like, all right, I need to pause and I need to think about what I'm doing and not just have it be sort of an action that Jesus might say, brood of vipers, right? And
Sure.
so, um,
Well, I think John brings up a good point. It's so easy in our individual spiritual lives to say, "Oh, I've never understood Sabbath. That I've got kids and they're in sports and like that's not
Mhm.
a thing, right?" Or fasting. That's crazy. Who would ever do that? It's easier to do that isolated than it is to do that in community.
Mhm.
Because in community, you pause and say, what is this thing that, Jesus was talking about, right? And then he talks about like his disciples not fasting because he was with them. But then when the bridegroom is gone, they will fast. And it's like, huh, what's going on here, right? And in community to be able to explore that together. And then, in the case of this with some podcasts, again, talk about just enriching your spiritual life. It would be so easy for me to just discard so many aspects of the faith because it's just not convenient,
Mhm.
right? And it's much harder when you're in community to have that happen because often there's somebody that's had a different experience or a different even faith tradition that emphasize something different. Um, and gosh, it just really makes you realize, in Genesis when, God made man and woman and made, intimate relation. Then you think of the Trinity, the Father, Son,
Mhm.
and Holy Spirit, that like God himself is in constant harmonious community. And then just to think about that in our relationship, spouses, loved ones, friends, in this case, brothers, it is clearly God's design
Mhm.
because it is in those relationships that we're able to really flourish and understand more about even just our individual faith walk.
Yeah. So, I don't know if your relation or your group is like mostly guys in like a similar age life stage. Is
Mhm.
that true?
It
Okay.
is true, yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys have been doing this for a while. You said you both have jobs, you have kids, you have wives. I'm sure you have hobbies and other things that you do. What would you say to someone that's just like, I don't have time for this? Like, I have too many other things to do.
Oh man, that's a really good question. I guess I can only speak to this from my own perspective, and John, I'm sure will have something much wiser than I to say about this. Um, but what I'd say is I actually found that as I got married and started having children, so this talks about stages of
Yeah.
life, right? That many of the things that I used to love to do just kind of had to melt away because
Mhm.
you have kids and a family. And so I actually felt very lonely.
Mm.
Um, so it wasn't so much having time, it was what of the things that were not fruitful was I going to cut out,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
And that's not to say that everything I was doing pre this was not fruitful in some way, but certainly not in terms of intentional spiritual development. And so, what I have found in my own faith journey is it is rarely a problem of time. It is a problem of chosen time
Mm.
Yeah, and priorities.
and priorities.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. That's my 2 cents on it. What do you
Yeah.
think, John?
Yeah, a lot of the struggle I have with that concept of dedicating time for friendship, I think is self-imposed. I travel a lot for work, and so I carried with me and still do this burden of all the time I'm not on the road, I need to spend
Mm.
with my wife and kids. And that was something I tried to do, but then it became clear that that was not forming me into the type of husband and father that they need. Like,
Mhm.
I need more than that,
Mhm.
as wonderful as they are, um, to be a whole person. And so it is an investment of time, but it's a priority. And whether it's time with friends or I think more importantly, daily time with the Lord, that's a big commitment of time.
Mhm.
And so um, I know that there was a long time where that wasn't a regular thing. And the difference in myself, hopefully it is apparent to others, but I know that just how I feel when I like the level of peace in my life, when I have daily time with the Lord is so much different than before. And so similarly, having friends uh, who I connect with on a deep level, um, that investment of time is uh, a, I'm glad to make that investment.
Mhm.
So it does take time. It takes work, like we said. It takes
Mhm.
uh, that, but it pays off. So
Yeah, and I would even, hearing you talk about it, John, I'm a verbal processor. So hearing you talk now, I'm processing. Um, I just think there's a world in which men have to ask themselves, like, what are my priorities? And like, no judgment, if that means that it's just not a priority of mine right now.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah. I mean, there would be some warnings of
Mhm.
that, like it could have an impact on your spiritual development, and God designed us to be in community and all those good things. But I don't. There's also just there can be phases because as we
mhm.
talked about, we have had some men come in and out of these, and it's like I get it. If there's a phase where this is not possible, then maybe it needs to look different, or you take a break and you re-enter it later on. So truly, no judgment as it relates to this. But if spiritual growth is something you are longing for, um, getting into kind of gender specific male communities with female communities, along with co-ed communities, certainly uh, has a big impact.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the broader concept of prioritizing your spiritual growth is sort of the foundation where it's like, all right, this is important to me. And there are multiple ways that that can play out. But I think what we've experienced is this aspect, this way is often a very fruitful way, both for sort of direct spiritual growth, but also the broader community that it can create. Um, and so it's sort of that idea of love God, love neighbor. Um, CJ is my neighbor. And
Literally,
it's a very, yeah.
we carpooled here tonight.
Right. So it's a very tangible way to um, to live out those commands.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, when Jesus said, these are the two most important commands, you should probably do them. And so I'm, happy to do them because he said that, but also happy to do them because I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Well, we're often so nice in Christian circles, but it's like Jesus is pretty clear in what he would say. I will know that you love me if you obey me. And I think we miss that. It's like, well,
Yeah.
no, if I want to obey you, no. I will know if you love me, if you obey me.
Yeah.
So I just
Or I'll obey you if it's what I want to do.
Or if it's convenient.
Right.
convenient.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I just think when you get to a place in your life, and this could be that you've hit rock bottom, this could be that your way isn't working anymore, this could be the recognition of sin, this could be a whole host of things that get people to this place. When you finally say, my way isn't working, there's something wrong, I think you just start asking yourself, maybe I can submit. I know a lot of men don't like that word. A lot of people don't like that word, but you
Yeah.
can submit to God's way. And part of God's way is being in intentional, deep community.
This just about me personally. I am an extrovert. I love to make new friends, but there is always part of me when I'm meeting someone new that is a little bit worried, like, are they going to think that I'm a total weirdo or that I'm like way too much or I'm coming on too strong here? So was there any part of that when you guys were like, we want to do this? Was there a little bit, or when you invite a new guy in, or is there any part of that where you're like, oh, I don't know, are they going to think we're weird?
For sure. Yeah. For sure. And I would say especially new, to your point, Veronica, when somebody new comes in, it's like, ooh, well, we've been doing this for a long time. So for us talking about different books and resources and disciplines and all of this, when you bring somebody new and it's like, say, what? What are you doing? So I do think there's even a little bit of wisdom in that you
Yeah.
have to be cautious. It would probably be a struggle for a brand new believer. And again, I don't mean this in an exclusive way, but it would be hard for a brand new male believer to jump in and understand all aspects. Although it could be transformational as well.
Yeah.
Or just maybe an equal yoke situation
Mhm.
where you can find that same connection with people who might be new to the faith.
Mhm.
But because you and I are close to the same age, walking with the Lord for a similar amount of time, that helps with that. So I
Yeah.
think it's more of a yoking
Yep.
question of finding that fit.
Yeah.
Yep. No, but I would say, I mean, I don't know if this happens in your life. You and I have never talked about this, but I will every once in a while, either my wife or somebody will be asking me a question, and somehow our weekly rhythms and patterns of what we try to work on comes up, and you will definitely get some side eyes. Like, say, what?
Yeah.
What are you guys doing?
Yeah.
And so I think that, just wisdom prevails of being like, hey, what are the right people to be in this group at what time of their spiritual journey?
Sure.
But yes,
And
yes.
The other thing that we've witnessed together, I think, is the interplay between some of these deeper groups and community groups, and how you can take people that are in sort of this community group connection and you get to know them the next level deep versus just the person down the pew.
Yeah.
And then I remember one of the meetings we had in your basement where it was we're alternating. So it was a co-ed group, but we'd have a men's meeting and we'd have a women's meeting on
Sure.
different weeks. And one of the men's ones, it was just so clear that some of the guys just had never had deep spiritual male friendships before.
Mm-hmm.
And it was beautiful. Like, and I think one of the guys was just like, never talked about this sort of stuff with another guy before.
Yeah.
And so I think that can be a good step to find people with whom you sort of resonate. And, you can dive in deeper with people in those forums. And then, because I think those community groups are great in what they are and continue to proliferate in that way. But then sometimes it makes sense to really dive deep with some people in those groups where you're finding that deeper connection.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, even on Sunday, Tiffany sort of talked about that. Like Jesus said, he had the 12 disciples, but then he had the 3 that he was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
really particularly close to. And I think it's it's a similar concept, right? Like we have groups of friends that are very important. We've got work friends, we've got acquaintances, we've got community groups, and all of these levels serve a purpose in our lives and an importance. But then there's that special place for those really intimate friends. So
And he sent them out 2 by 2.
I know. Yep,
Yeah.
that's true.
No, to your point, Veronica, I think this is often something I've learned over my spiritual walk, is just recognizing that God doesn't expect you to evangelize like the world. He expects, I say that.
Some people maybe.
Right, right. I guess what I really mean is so often it feels overwhelming,
Yeah.
right? It feels overwhelming when you recognize like, hey, as a follower of Christ, I need to be thinking about the way I'm acting, behaving, and welcoming others into the God's family. And you go, but this often is really small, right? It's close, intimate relationships. It's growing those relationships, sharpening one another, and then living out that faith in your local community. Um, for me, at least early on, it felt so vast and unattainable that it was almost like I'm not even moving towards that, right? But the recognition of what Jesus's life was like on earth and the close, intimate relationships that he had, that then, really through the 12 did evangelize the world,
Yep.
right? Um, that at least for me makes it more tangible to recognize the importance of the depth of the close relationships.
Yeah. Great. Well, I could keep sitting here talking to you guys about this for a long time, but for the sake of our listeners, we probably shouldn't. But thank you guys so much for coming out tonight and talking to me. We really appreciate it. Any final words you want to say to anybody?
I would just encourage men. I mentioned this at the beginning, but it's been a passion of mine, largely because of the intersection of my own spiritual void, and then getting into men's community that I was just super anxious about on the front end, mainly because I was embarrassed of my sin. And so I just want to encourage men. I mean, don't make it bigger than it needs to be. Just take a step in that direction.
Yeah.
Consider intentional male community and see what the Holy Spirit has in store for you. So that would just be my encouragement to, I mean, it's true for both men and women, but specifically for men, my encouragement would be take that first kind of scary step and see what God has in store for you.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Thanks so much, guys. We will end it there, wrap it up. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you guys.
The better.